everyone, how's it going? Today I'm going to be talking about how to get into iOS development. And quick note before we start, thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Whether you need a domain or a website or an online store, Squarespace has got you covered. So I have been an iOS developer for about 4 years now, and I get a lot of questions from y'all about how to get started in iOS development. So the reason why I want to talk about iOS development this month is because next month Apple is hosting their Worldwide Developer Conference, or WWDC, which I'm going to. And so I want to make 2 videos this month talking about iOS development to get myself and y'all hyped for WWDC. And so just to set some context, WWDC is a week-long conference hosted by Apple in the Bay Area, where they invite developers from all over the world and talk about the newest technology that's coming out. In the iOS developer community, we often call it Christmas because Apple brings gifts to us that we have always wanted, and it's wonderful. There are sessions that are happening throughout the day to learn about this new technology, and there are also labs so we can go and talk to Apple engineers and ask any specific questions. I got to go for the first time last year, and it was so fun, and I'm stoked that I get to go again this year. So you can actually follow along. The first day of WWDC, there's a keynote where they announce all of the new things, and then they also stream a lot of the major talks throughout the week. Okay, so let's jump into today's topic now that we have some context on why I really want to talk about iOS this month. Okay, so when people ask me this question, I oftentimes lead them to these 3 resources that I think are great jumping off points for starting in iOS development. By the way, don't worry, everything that I'm going to talk about is going to be in the description box below. Okay, so let's talk about that first one. I have to come back around now. So the first one I'm going to recommend is a tutorial by Apple. So this specific one that I'm pointing to is a step-by-step tutorial on how to build your first iOS app. It's well written and explains things very well, and it's always up to date. Unlike other parts of software engineering, iOS development is completely owned by one company, Apple. Everything from the hardware to the software to the IDE to the programming language is what Apple owns, and so they all work really well together. I think it's called a closed ecosystem.
No.
Or a closed world.
No.
Something like that. Apple has also in recent years made a huge push to get more people into iOS development. If you remember the launch of the Playgrounds app on iPad a couple of years ago, I think that was like one of the big first steps to get more people into iOS development. And since then, they've made a lot of improvements to make iOS development a lot easier to jump into. So yeah, Apple documentation is going to be the source of truth and is oftentimes the most resourceful place to go to about iOS development. Next one. The second one I highly recommend is raywenderlich.com. This is an amazing online resource as far as Apple tutorials go. They have extensive tutorials for Swift, iOS, tvOS, macOS, watchOS, and basically any topic or Apple framework that you can think of. They have a bunch of tutorials on these topics, and they typically start off with a starter project with step-by-step instructions, so at the end you'll have a working app using the topic that you're learning. They're really useful, and they're really highly recommended by the iOS community. Most of the tutorials are free with the exception of some of these starter packs or these more in-depth guides, but they have plenty of material that's free that should get you well on your way to starting iOS. So yeah, from there you can start to learn whatever piques your interest. So if you want to learn about iOS game development, or if you want to know about one very specific thing about the Maps framework, then they have tutorials that cater to all of those things. I still use this site a lot because I love how the tutorials give me the experience of working with different frameworks. Okay, so the third one I recommend is for those of you who do really well learning from books. And I personally think that the Big Nerd Ranch publishes the best iOS tutorial books on the market. I'm someone who learns really well by doing things, and so I love tutorial-based resources. And Big Nerd Ranch has great books on iOS and Swift programming that have detailed tutorials on creating iOS apps. I think I should go get my copy. I found my book. Here's my version of Swift programming, the Big Nerd Ranch guide. I remember walking through this and reading this a lot when I was just starting iOS development, and it was really helpful. Albeit this is like a pretty outdated version now because this is on Swift 2.0 and Swift is on 4, but they come out with new versions all the time with updated examples and code. So those are the 3 main resources that I highly recommend for anyone wanting to get into iOS development. If you know of any others, please leave it in the comments down below. So yeah, I personally really love doing iOS development, and I think I'll keep doing it for a while. But I remember when I was first starting out and I didn't have very many resources around me, and so hopefully these are going to be helpful for you. I also remember that one of the hardest things about starting iOS development that kept me from starting for a long time was that Xcode was just such a mystery to me because I didn't know where things were and what the buttons meant. So to help with that, for anyone else who's kind of stuck in that scenario, my second video that I'm gonna make this month is kind of like a walkthrough of Xcode. I remember in college I took a mobile programming class, and the very first office hour session was the TA walking us through how to use Xcode. And he would show us like, you click here for this, and like this button does this, and in order to this, go here. And it helped so much because I remember I had tried doing iOS development before, but then I got stuck because I had no idea how to use Xcode. And so once I figured out how to use Xcode, I was like, oh, this makes so much more sense now. So I hope that the tutorial is going to help unblock some of you and get you started. Also, I'll note that this will be one of the very, very few tutorials that I'll make on this channel. I personally don't really enjoy making tutorials, I've mentioned this before, but if you are looking for more video tutorials on iOS development, there's a great channel called Let's Build That App, and he has a bunch of videos on iOS and Swift development, so go to his channel if you'd like to see more iOS video tutorials. Okay, honestly, I could probably talk about iOS development for a long time and make so many videos about it, but I think I'm going to end it here. Again, if you know of any other resources on iOS development, or you want to give advice, you just want to chat, whatever, tell me how you're doing. Leave a comment down below. And if you found this video to be helpful, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and click the notification bell to get notified for my videos. Again, I really want to thank Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. So here's another use case where I think Squarespace could be really great. Technical blogs. They're a great way to get your name out there and also contribute back to the technical community about things that you know. If you watched my video with Amy Codes, then we talk a little bit about how important it is to teach others, because not only does it contribute back to the community, but it also emphasizes that knowledge in your brain. And technical blogs are great for doing that. If you use Squarespace, they have beautiful designer templates that'll get you going in no time. It's an all-in-one platform, so you never have to install, patch, or upgrade anything ever, so the only thing that you have to think about is writing stuff for your blog. They have award-winning 24/7 customer service, and so anytime you need help, they're there. It's also really easy to set up a domain or transfer one in Squarespace, and so you can brand it with whatever you'd like. So head on over to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Mayuko for 10% off your first purchase of a domain or website. I'm actually going to leave some of my favorite technical blogs, which are mostly iOS based, in the description box below to give you some inspiration. That's it for today, and I'll see you next time. Bye!